The Puzzle of the Sleeping Sharks. The next summer, Eugenie and her assistants came back to the sleeping shark caves of Mexico. Would they find the answers to the mystery of the sleeping sharks this time? Their tests had shown that the water in the caves was at times different from the water in the open sea. There was more oxygen, for one thing, and fresh water was seeping up into the caves from streams under the ocean floor. Perhaps there is something in the water to make the sharks groggy, Eugenie thought. Perhaps our sleeping sharks are drawn into the caves first to get cleaned, and second to enjoy the pleasant sensations, Dr. Clark wrote. And did the sharks really sleep in the caves? The more Eugenie studied them, the more she thought they didn't. When Eugenie and her assistant were in the caves, the sharks' eyes followed their every move. Eugenie wanted to find out more about the sharks. Eugenie wanted to find out more about the sharks' sleep-like state. Do fish sleep the way we sleep? She wondered. The way other animals sleep? It's very difficult to make tests on fish, Eugenie said. We're still working on ways it can be done with sharks in captivity and with sharks in the open sea. Eugenie wrote in her National Geographic article, perhaps in deeper waters in other parts of the world, requiem sharks also sleep. She was right. In 1976, Eugenie was invited to Japan again. A graduate student, Anita George, came too, and this time Eugenie took along her stepfather, Nobusan. He was over 70 years old and was a wonderful help. He spoke Japanese, and he also learned to keep charts of the breathing rates of sharks. Eugenie and her assistants dived in many places. In one bay, Eugenie and Anita saw over 100 sharks, more sharks than they had ever seen before at one time. Some were swimming around in the shallow end of the bay. Eugenie and Anita stood in the water taking notes while sharks swam around them. Some of the sharks were in underwater caves piled on top of each other, and they seemed to be asleep. Eugenie found two different kinds of sleeping sharks in Japan. One of them was a white tip requiem shark. But what about the other white tip reef shark, the sluggish shark that spends a good deal of time on the bottom of the reef? Perhaps there were other reasons why this shark got into a sleep-like state. More tests had to be made, more sharks studied. Once, a scientist took her to see 30 sharks in another underwater cave not far from Tokyo. Eugenie swam around, petting them, and they didn't wake up. The scientist made her promise she would never tell where the cave was. If people in Tokyo knew about this place, he said, they would all race down here to hunt sharks for food. And people say sharks are killers, Eugenie said. Isn't it odd that people kill and eat more sharks than sharks eat people? At the end of the summer, Eugenie returned to her classes at the university. Where will you go next to solve the mystery of the sleeping sharks? Her students asked her. I hear that in the Red Sea there is a cave. Eugenie's eyes sparkled. And in that cave there are 5 sleeping sharks. They are the white tip reef shark, the same kind of shark I saw in Japan. This summer, I'll go back to the Red Sea. It's like a puzzle, Eugenie told her students. You think you have the pieces put together, and then, suddenly, one piece doesn't fit, and you're off on something else. A mighty shark and a little fish. Several years earlier, Eugenie had gone to Israel to do research at the Marine Laboratory on the Red Sea. She was studying a little fish they called the Moses sole. The first time she caught the Moses sole in her net, she was surprised to see a bit of white milky fluid oozing out along its fins. She reached out and touched the fins. The milky stuff felt slippery, slimy. Her fingers felt tight and tingly. That milky fluid might be poisonous. Eugenie made tests in the lab, and then she began experiments in the sea. She put the Moses sole in a large plastic bag that fit over a branch of coral where many little fish lived. Next, she squeezed the Moses sole through the plastic bag. She squeezed until a few drops of milk came out. In minutes, every small fish that had been swimming in the bag was dead, killed by the poison of the Moses sole. What would happen to bigger, more dangerous fish? She wondered. She began testing the Moses sole with sharks in the lab. She tied the little fish to a line in the shark tank. First, the sharks swam toward the Moses sole with their mouths open, ready to gobble the little fish. Then, with their jaws still wide open, the sharks jerked away. They thrashed and leaped about the tank, shaking their heads wildly from side to side. All the while, the Moses sole kept swimming as if nothing unusual was happening. Next, Eugenie put ordinary fish right next to the Moses sole on the line. The sharks kept away from those fish too. For the next test, Eugenie washed the skin of a Moses sole with alcohol. She dropped the fish into the shark tank. The little fish was inside the shark's stomach in no time. Washing the fish with alcohol removed its poison. So did cooking it. After it was cooked, it was safe to eat. What was this powerful poison? The little Moses sole didn't look very special. It looked like any flounder you might see in the supermarket. Eugenie read that its milk had first been reported in 1871, over 100 years ago, but nobody knew it was poison until Eugenie's discovery. The Moses sole certainly kept away sharks in the lab's tanks. Now what would happen with big sharks in the sea? Eugenie and her assistants set out shark lines in the sea far from shore. They baited the line with different kinds of fish, some alive and some dead, all along the line in between the other fish, but not too close. They hung the Moses sole. They set the line during the day. Nothing happened in the daylight hours. Then the sun began to set and the sea darkened. Eugenie and her assistants put on scuba gear and slipped into the water to watch. The sea was calm and as smooth as glass. Suddenly, the water rippled over the shark line. One dark shadow drifted up from the deep, then another. From the dark depths of the sea, sharks were swimming up. Silently, swiftly, they swam to the little fish wriggling on the line. The sharks ate up all the fish one by one, all but the Moses sole. Day after day, Eugenie repeated the test. She noticed that the sharks came to the line most often at dusk and again the next morning. Before the sun rose, each time they avoided the Moses sole. One evening, Eugenie's student, Avie Barnes, was swimming along the place where the reef drops down like a wall. Avie signaled to Eugenie to press the button on the underwater camera. The camera lights flashed in the dark sea. Inches away from Avie was a large requiem shark, right near his head. There they are. Eugenie could see the shark's eyes gleaming. She felt goosebumps on her arms, but the shark was not interested in Avie. There were more tempting things for it to eat, like the fish on the line. And once again, Eugenie saw the shark gobble up all the fish on the line, all but the little Moses sole. Naphtali Primor, one of Eugenie's students in Israel, studied the effects of the milk of the Moses sole. The poison from this little fish has proven more effective than any other chemical shark repellent. A thimbleful of the milky poison could keep hungry sharks away for many hours. 18 hours in one of the tests. It doesn't wash away in the water like other chemicals. A company that makes suntan lotion heard about the Moses sole, and the vice president phoned Eugenie Clark. The company had made a suntan lotion that doesn't come off in the water. Now they wanted to make a product that prevented sunburn and shark attack, all in one tube. Eugenie is glad that a useful shark repellent might come from the little fish, but she doesn't think that the Moses sole should be used only as a shark repellent. She says that sharks aren't as dangerous to swimmers and divers as most people think. There is another chemical in the milky fluid of the Moses sole that can stop the action of poisonous snake bites, scorpion bites, and bee stings. Eugenie Clark thinks that if research companies are willing to spend the time and money, they might find a way to manufacture this chemical and save the lives of many people who are bitten by poisonous creatures, even on land.